things out all the time.
That's what the CEO of Spotify said recently, right? That everyone was talking about maybe like a week ago, when he said that artists nowadays can't just release a few songs. You got to constantly release albums.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what he said, but it's just the truth. It's just the way that people consume music now.
Yeah,
And
it's definitely
also,
a consumer's market.
it used to be kind of like music was its own sort of thing. It was its own sort of mode of enjoyment, and music wasn't necessarily competing for that against that many things for that like sliver of attention. So, but now music is also competing with like every, every video on YouTube, every other sort of media experience that you can have now just in your living room.
Do you think that ever affects your songwriting? Like, kind of like, since like music evolves so quickly, have you ever like thought about like, am I doing this because of the market, or do you try to like stay focused on what you've been doing
I've
songwriting
never,
wise?
yeah, I've never worried about that or thought about that. Again, like, but to your question, I think that that sort of mentality and the intention of writing, trying to like write for TV or commercials or things like that, I think that that has influenced music overall in a big way. I think that that's changed the way that people write songs. I think it's changed the sound of a lot of songs and popular music. And there's a kind of specific sort of form that you start to hear, you
Oh
know.
yeah. Oh yeah.
So there definitely are a lot of people who are thinking about that, and that's not bad or good. It's not something that I've thought about a whole lot, but maybe I should have.
Who knows?
Well, you know what? Just like everything in life, songwriting is so much about your intention.
I've never heard that before.
You never heard what before?
That it's all about the intention.
Well, so much of what comes out, is about intent. I mean, everything we do is about intention. So if you're like, after class, I'm gonna go get a burrito, your intention, you're setting that intention to go get a burrito after class, right?
Yeah.
You can't go get that burrito unless you decide I'm gonna go get that burrito. So you're setting that intention, So writing songs, if people are setting their intention of like, well, I want to write songs that are gonna, fit this particular mold because I want them to be played in this kind of outlet, this kind of thing. So that intention really shapes their creative output. It really shapes like what they do. If your intention is, that that you want to write a song that will, be something that someone can lean on when they're like going through their darkest time, something that they can kind of relate to and feel, buttressed by, then that's your intention and that's going to shape your creative output, right?
Yeah.
So being conscious of what it is that your intention is, just like with everything that you approach in life, is a wise thing to be attentive to.
I had a question.
Sure.
Just wondering, like, with your history of music and your success, do you feel like music nowadays is more based on like instant need gratification, whereas like back in the 80s or something, you had like full on stories, or like like a Meatloaf song was like 8 minutes, and and like just like stuff like that had more appeal to people because people would wait in line for the records, and they would have more of an interest because it was like they felt like they had to wait for it. But nowadays, music, I feel like maybe I'm wrong or just not finding the right kind of music, because there is good music out there all the time, but there is some music in the mainstream world that just doesn't really feel like it has a lot of, I don't know, it just feels like it's, what's the next song? What's the next song? It's not necessarily like, and it's all about like in the club or this person or whatever. And it just kind of feels very repetitive, or like it's on a stream of, how do we keep people engaged instead of like putting out like, I don't know, good songs, good material, good lyrics, stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, sure, that's definitely changed, and it's changed because of the way that people again consume music. Where uh, it really has to be like brighter and more in your face or whatever, because it's competing against all these other shiny things that are drawing on the person's attention and sort of depleting that, dispersing that attention. And then it also evolved that way because again of like people are writing with the mindset that like it's getting less attention one, so they're writing it with the intention that like, okay, there's got to be like a hook here and a hook here, and so it's all these kind of like cheap sort of songwriting tricks to like draw the ear. So that's what you get a lot of in songwriting, and that's, I guess,
Shots
you know
fired.
what you're talking about, where it's like you're really trying to take the person on a journey, on a trip, and you're trying to like take the person from here and you want to end up here. There's less of that because that takes more investment, one, as a songwriter, and it takes more investment as a listener. And I think there's an overall lack of confidence that the listener is going to make that investment. So people sort of like go toward, just the shiny hook, like the thing that's just going to draw the ear.
Yeah, totally.
So it goes back to your intention, like everything works in cycles, with songwriting and music and everything really, so if you're going to, you could draw parallels with like, the way things were in the early 50s or whatever, where it was very single based and, artists were putting out music all the time. I mean, it's a version of that on like fucking, it's a version of that, right? You know, so I don't think it's any reason to despair. People are always wanting like a genuine experience. They're always like craving that journey in one way or another. They're always craving like something transformative. So, you know, don't become cynical about the whole thing. If that's what you want to do, if that's your intention, then you put that into your music, because everybody comes around, but they won't come around if that output isn't there, right? Like there's nothing for them to come around to. So you have to create that,
Yeah, I like the idea of intention a lot, actually, because then you're kind of creating from a place of, possibility, and, instead of like fear based or whatever.
You're creating from a place of like what you want to see in the world, like what's missing for you, what does the world like need, you know what I mean? So you're creating from that place.
There's Noah has a question here, Patrick. He says, how does your writing process change if you're writing for an advertisement compared to when you're writing for fun?
Sure. So I don't generally write songs for advertisement. I write kind of like instrumental music, and it's usually on the piano for some reason. I was never a piano player growing up or anything. It's just kind of sort of secondary skill that I've developed. So my process is already different, because generally when I write songs, I write them on the guitar, and I have a very specific kind of aesthetic there, or a very specific kind of approach. And uh, just instrumental music for uh, ads or something like that. People generally come to me for also a very specific thing, which is just kind of like noodly meandering piano, like pretty wallpaper. And so, you know, it's much, it's easier in the sense that like there's less thought put into it in terms of like, you know, again, my sort of intention for the piece. That's less relevant, and it becomes more about what is their intention for the piece that they want me to write. You know, what do they want this to, how do they want this to function? Because what I want in that situation, like if you're writing for like a commercial or TV, what you want, you know, is less relevant. Like you want to do something that is like cool and that you find interesting, but it has to support what the visual is. It has to support what's going on there, and has to support that and accentuate like the emotional notes that they're going for without becoming the thing that people are paying attention to, right? Because it's about being in the background, you know, and just kind of supporting the structure. Does that make sense?
He says thank you. Yeah. As you guys were talking about this kind of form thing, just for those of you who are interested in the strict pop thing, there's a great book by John Seabrook called "The Song Machine," which is basically talks about the algorithms that are used to decide whether or not an album is a hit. So they can tell, they can play a record like, and there's like these great Kelly Clarkson stories in the book, but about like whether or not, you know, your album is going to be a hit before it ever is released. And so, you know, I think it's Kelly Clarkson. It's somebody big like that. The story was like, you know, her first record was like multi-platinum record, and that, but she was really wanted to do like a more like a Rolling Stones or singer-songwriter based thing, and she eventually like demanded that she was do it that way. And the next record that came out, she only sold like a couple million. So from a business perspective, the label was like, you had a 90% drop in sales. I mean, from our perspective, they still sold like millions of records. And then on her third record, she went back to the song machine way of like trusting that the algorithms. And so there's a lot of Euro pop and stuff that's being, if you're interested in that, like it's not that interesting for me as a songwriting perspective, and that's why I don't really use the book in the class, but it's useful to know.
Sounds like South Korea right now.
um,
But can I add, like, I as Tyler's was made a point of like, you know, things made, have you ever written just in the hope that writing a song in the hope that it will become sensationalized, it'll become big, you write it and you're like, wow, I want to hear this on radio. I feel like a lot of artists have that hope, but
Yeah.
it's not realistic for a lot of people, you know, but
Well,
myself included, but.
Well, it's not that it's not realistic necessarily, you know, but it's like, I mean, I don't know the whole algorithm thing. It doesn't, it seems really hard to put that into an algorithm. I mean, whether something is commercially successful depends on so many like causes and conditions lining up just perfectly. For, you know, for that to happen, there has to be so many things that just completely fall into sync. And I don't, you know, the music is a part of that, but it's also, you know, what people are paying attention to. Is there like, you know, is there a feeling of fear in you know, our collective mind? Are people trying to like escape this or go into this? Are people being receptive to, you know, this kind of thing because they're reacting to that? Are they I don't know if I'm getting this across. You know, there's so many things that go into that happening that it's almost not even worth thinking about, to be honest. you know. And again, it's like, it's more important, you know, I think, to find something that is unique to you, that you feel like you're completely expressing the truth of that moment in. Because whether something is successful or not, you know, who can say, you know, how that happens, you know. But at the end of the day, like, you're spending your time, which you have a very finite amount of, you know, you're spending your precious time doing this thing. So make it as meaningful, and, you know, be as present in it as you possibly can, you know. If you want to do songwriting as a profession, I still think that that is the thing. I mean, you know, spend your time, look at like what is going on production wise, what is making sense, um, and how like you can incorporate that into your own thing. Um, you know, you can still do that and be a professional musician. Um, but, you know, finding yourself in what you're doing, you know.
So I came in kind of late. I don't know if you might have said this already, but I was wondering, like, when you're starting to write a song, like I've tried songwriting for a while, and I've had my different struggles. But one of the things that I've noticed is, I was wondering, like, for your own process, do you come up with like a theme, or do you come up with the story first, or do you come up with chord progressions? Like, you know how some songs are like super happy and the lyrics are like, you know, really sad or something, and they kind of have that opposition. Do you look for themes like that when you're writing music, or?
Kind of. So it's, you know, I kind of like I kind of hone in on just sort of a feeling, or you know, a perspective that I'm what
Yeah.
really like I want to express, you know. And then uh, with that kind of intention, then I sort of will play the guitar and try to emote that thing through the guitar. And then through that, you know, there's a melody that's already kind of there, you know. The way the melody is structured, there's kind of words that are already there, you know. And then you kind of like, you shape that, you kind of sculpt it, um, you know, with what it is you're trying to say, and you try and like for me, you know, like trying to say things in a way that is uncontrived, unpretentious, and direct, but that leave enough ambiguity to for the listener to put themselves in the song, right? You know, because at the end of the day, the song's worthless if it doesn't reflect their life, right? If they can't hear themselves in the song,
Relate to it, yeah.
right? And it's just been a exercise.
Cool, thank you.
Watching your live videos, you can definitely tell that you have a sense of technical playing, like going back and forth between um, playing a melody line versus chords on your guitar.
Mm-hmm.
As a songwriter, how important to you is it that you have a sense of technical playing when you're writing your songs?
So the technical thing is something that it's not, it's a complete afterthought. It's not even an afterthought, you know. I mean, so for me, like the technical side of things, I don't really think about, uh, and that the guitar playing is just kind of something that is sort of developed through, you know, when I was a kid, you know, taking some fingerstyle guitar lessons, working on that, but then not really caring about it, right? And then getting older, playing in bands, you know, sort of developing kind of aesthetic that way. And then moving to Los Angeles where I didn't know anyone and didn't have a band to fill space. And then was like, okay, well, I still want to play out, so I have to fill some of this space, and I don't want to just stand up there and strum. So then, throwing all my picks away and just working with my fingers, um, from there on out, but not really knowing how to approach it, having some kind of background, you know, it was just something that sort of evolved through those things. And it's just kind of become part of the fabric of how I play. So it's not something that I think about. I don't, if you want to write technical songs, if you want to write songs that are like, that's part of the thing of the song, is that they're just super mathy, super technical. That's cool. There's a lot of cool music like that. And if that enters into your process, then that's cool too. How that enters into your process is not like necessarily part of the attention. It's more about you access that technical stuff when you're trying to figure something out, or when you come up against a problem, then you use the technical side of music to like figure out, okay, what am I trying to do here? I'm getting caught here. What am I, that's how I've never really written that kind of song, but that's how I would think of it. That's how I use like the knowledge of music that I have, which is very limited. It's not something that enters into the process unless I need to figure something out. Does that answer your question? Sorry, that was a real meandering kind of answer.
Yeah. Thank you.
I ask, I don't know how to, I guess, what kind of headspace are you normally in when you feel an inspiration to write something down?
Well, people ask that a lot, and the best way to get around that, there's some people I know who it's like they can only write when they're inspired. But I feel like I can pretty much, if I wanted to, write something every time I picked up the guitar. And I think the way that you get there and do that is that it's just make it something that you do all the time. Take the importance of it kind of out of the equation a little bit, taking the grandioseness of just make it something that you do in your everyday life. You have 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, bringing it into your life. But then for me, every time I pick up the guitar, I'm not doing it mindlessly, kind of like, just fucking around. Every time I pick up the guitar, I make sure it's in tune, and even if I have 5 minutes to play, I'm doing it with the intention of trying to find something, right? Of trying to find something that I'm feeling, something that I, want to portray. But doing it all the time. And it doesn't matter if, you don't get anything when you sit down, kind of free yourself from the expectation of, I need to make this. I need to make this like epic hit song. I need to make this, this song that's going to fit in this kind of world. Free yourself of all that and just sit down and see what happens, see what comes up. And then if something comes up that catches you, then if you have time, try to work with it as far as you can down that road. See if you can just sit there and write the whole thing then, even if it takes you 8 hours of just sitting there, or however long you have. See if you can get that far. And then I always found that actually doing recording demos of the song was actually detrimental to me, because then I the song, the recording to get back to where I was, and getting back to that moment isn't just like what's going on sound wise, right? It's where you're at mentally. It's where you're, you know, it's your emotions, it's your feeling, it's that intention. And so for me, when I would do a voice memo, I would kind of like let go of that stuff. And, you know, if you really want to make a song, for me at least, I have to kind of like keep it. I have to kind of keep that intention, that feeling, that sort of thing going. So as much as like sitting down with the guitar is part of my process, it's also about just like keeping that thing present. You know, even like if I have to go, you know, do this and I have to go do that, or I have to go, you know, go to the park with my son or whatever, there's always a part of me that kind of keeps that thing present. So then I can really get back to it, because it's not just the sound, it's what's going on, you know, behind all the sound that you have to get back to in order to really finish that song. Otherwise, you know, it's kind of wallpaper, you know.
Sometimes I feel like stuff comes to me as much as as fast as it slips away from me. It slips away as fast as it comes. Like it just comes in and I'm just out of my brain, and then it's never comes back.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I don't know that a lot of people think of it. I'm not saying it's the right way to think of it, but, you know, also using songwriting in the process of, if it is like something that where you sit down with a guitar or piano or instrument or whatever and write the song, you know, and that happens where like something will come up, like a flash or something will happen, and you'll be like, oh, that was cool. What was going on there? Right. I can't get back there. You know, that happens. And part of the process is developing your attention to what's going on, right? And completely disappearing into what's going on. And then, you know, trying to make that the place where you get back to, you know, the place where you disappear, and it's just like that song. And I think that when you lose it, you know, it's because you're trying to conceptualize it. You're trying to like, what was that thing? And you're trying to like find that idea of the thing rather than just being in the thing. So if you can develop your attention, not your intention, more, then you can kind of like see that when that happens, and then you kind of just work with it and see if it goes somewhere. And, does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense. I guess that happens. When I like sit down and I have the intention of writing a song, nothing ever happens, and it's probably because I'm not very practiced at it. And then like it happens to me in the car a lot. Like I'll be driving and then like I'll start humming something, some words come to me, and I'm like, oh, that was kind of cool, but it's because I'm driving. My attention is not really. It's in that. There's like you have your conscience, and then the thing behind your conscience that like works in the background.
So
and then like
being attentive of that, Connor. So like, you know, that happens, and it comes because you're just allowing yourself to be that melody, right? You're just allowing yourself to do that. There's no grand plan or anything, right? You're just kind of like, it's already there, you know? So being attentive to that, you know, and trying not to necessarily, you know, over conceptualize it, or like, you know, now I've got to have this intention of doing this, whatever. No, just kind of like try to just sort of like put your attention on what's going on there, and like see where it goes. You know, it's trying to go somewhere. So rather than trying to like understand it and trying to make it, trying to like bend it to your will or whatever, see if like you can find just where it goes, where it wants to go. Just making everyone more confused, I think.
I had a question. This is more along the lines of my experience, but or just actually kind of Yeah. Well, I'll just ask it. So when I'm writing music, I sometimes run out of ideas for chord progressions, or like I'd say I know a good amount of chords, but I don't at the same time. Like I don't know what would progress the best way. Would you recommend a teacher, a chord book, or more music theory, or like anything to help me in that sort of way? Because sometimes I can write lyrics, but then sometimes I just go, "There's a sound here that I just don't know how to do," you know,
Yeah.
or like.
Well, so I would say there's two approaches to that, and maybe do them both. Which is, for me, like like I took some lessons, but I didn't really have like and to be honest, I still don't have like a real, like Roger knows a lot about like music theory. He knows like, you know, all the like technical things of music, so there's knowing that, and and doing it, but not knowing how to explain it, right? And then when I was like learning how to write songs or whatever, so I was like kind of like you, like I had like a certain amount of chords, I knew a lot of like chords, I knew my way around the guitar pretty well. um, but yeah, you kind of get bored with like the same chords and you want to try something different. So I always just tried to like, um, all right, so there's this chord, what if I just change this in the chord, right? So you just start changing like a couple notes in the chord, and then something in the chord, sort of like the voice of the chord changes, and so like where that wants to go changes, right? And then I would always just rely on Raji and say like, Raji, what am I doing? And then he'd tell me.
By the way, I never took music theory in school. As I told you guys in my modules, everything is only about like what I wanted to find out for a problem, like Patrick was saying. But so some of you who are in the theory classes, you guys know more about theory than me. um, but I
Well,
like theory.
another nesting
I
in.
like theory. I like that kind of stuff too. But and so because I think sometimes the music students are like, oh God, theory class. But like, because I never had to like, take it as a class. I'm like, this is really interesting. I
Well,
really like Arnold
theory is
Schoenberg. Like,
yeah. Theory, I have a friend who is, he's taken all the words to operas, not the music, but he's taking all this music theory just so he can kind of like better write the words to operas. So he technically like knows all this knowledge, but it's not linked to sound in his brain. Like when I talk to him about it, he's not linking the knowledge of music to the sound of music. So, you know, it all comes back to like what you kind of hear and where you're trying to like go with it, how it makes you feel, you know, and then the knowledge of like how music works and everything, uh, comes into sort of explaining it to other musicians you're working with. You're trying to get something specific out of them. It's really helpful to be like, okay, so on this chord, do this and this and this, whatever, or be able to write it out. Um, so I think it's a good thing to know, because it just furthers your ability to communicate. I don't think that it should necessarily play a big role in, well, for me, it's never played a big role in the actual process of writing music. But again, like if it's so individual. So if that's part of your process, then that's cool. Just run with it.
No, yeah, I appreciate that. I'm gonna try the guitar chord with different structures and different notes. I think that's a good idea, and I agree with you on the music theory. It is important, but it's it can be used for different stuffs and might not always go into the feel of music. Just goes better into explaining music sometimes, or if you're playing for someone, it helps you in that career a lot too.
Yeah. Or if you want to be like a session musician or something like that, you know, or you're, yeah, like a string player, people who are like, if you're expected to just walk into a situation and be able to like play that piece of music, it's, you know, indispensable. But yeah.
I think also, Patrick, you're really, your songs are really tight compositions, right? Whereas like I mean, and those of you who are watching the modules this week, they're about texture, and like that's
Mm.
like, for me, it's about like it's like, how do I find the techniques to get the textures? And but like, just I've noticed over the years, like your songs, that there's a really, really tightly composed process. So for me, when I get on stage, I would rather be able to like meander or sing a different melody or play a different melody, because I can, it's like, well, here are the chords going by and I'll just reach to this note in the chord, like a Mark Rothko painting or something like that. Um, but there's a much more like like it's like a detailed drawing when I like look at your songs, like an almost like MC Escher type of drawing or something. It's like everything is so intentional at every moment. Like, um,
I think a lot of that has come from feeling like, well, for, you know, my entire professional career, I've been kind of on my own. So I think a lot of like the songs kind of evolved that way, because it's something, it's like um, it just feels like it has to be that way to me. I don't know. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's part of, to me, being just having to kind of like, and to play it by myself in a really minimal kind of way. So I always felt like all those details had to be there, and had to be very compact and put together. But I don't
it's definitely a good thing.
know.
Like, especially for those of us who don't
I
write
feel
that
like
way.
it's a weakness too, but you know.
But we talk about this all the, for 20 years. Patrick and I have talked about this. Like Patrick really likes form, and he's like, you should like commit to form more, right?
Sure. You know, I mean, you can have like a sort of, you can have a more formless form. It can just be, if you're, it just be like the form is like where it needs to go, right? Which I think your stuff has. It's like it's going somewhere, right? And that can become the form too. Like, um, that's where I get into trouble. But.
Yeah, and it's this thing, we haven't done this yet in class, but it's coming up in modules. But like Indian bhajans, right, which are these, the form of the song is silence, and then this kind of wave arc that kind of speeds up, call and response, little pause, repeat, and then silence. That is the form, and then it's like it's all in Sanskrit, like the words are in Sanskrit, and so like the way that the bhajans work on an emotional level. And then there's like bhajans for the morning. You sing these songs in the morning. You sing these songs in the evening. It's a really different way of thinking about music than we think about it in the commercial West.
I mean, that's an interesting. I don't want to derail the whole conversation and get into the weeds, but so I mean, bhajans, you're basically trying to, the function of the bhajan, right, is to sort of break through like form, right?
Not. Oh, so you paused there for a second. Sorry, were you done? Were you done?
No, but
Oh, so keep going. I can hear you now. We can hear you.
well, I was
You
just saying, you know, like the bhajans, you're trying to break through uh, form in so many ways, like in a spiritual sense, right? You're trying to like break through this constrictive form of self that we've kind of all created, and attain this, the greater self, you know, which is beyond form. but it has, the bajan itself has a very definite form, right?
Yeah.
So you use form to break through form.
Yeah, and it's also it's about, because it's usually call and response. It's about a collective energy, and so you're leading. You never know how long it's gonna be. You're like, whoever's leading the bhajan just is like, okay, now I'm gonna sing the next phrase, and because it's call and response, that we know everybody's like, okay, now we're like
Right, right.
Om Namah Shiva or something like this. Like now we're saying Om Namah Shiva, and it's like, and so it's about energy leading and energy work. That's that. But I think it's an important, contrast to the ways that we sometimes think a little bit too much, like in the maybe in the West or something, that form is a map that we, can put into bar lines or 32 bar form or something.
Right. Well, there are like really specific forms in popular music. I mean, even like the 12 bar blues, like that's a very specific form, and it's the same every time. And you can hear a gazillion different songs that have that very specific.
Sorry, there's like a little pause there.
Did we lose him?
Uh, are you back?
Is it me? Yeah, I'm back now.
You kind of froze for a second. You were saying there's a specific form in pop music, and then whatever you said after that was cut out.
When I was talking about the 12 bar blues.
Yeah.
Just after that,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. I don't know what I was. I don't know where I lost you. I don't want to. I was just saying, even though they have a very specific form, you know, many of the songs feel very different. So there's an underlying structure that's the same, but like the intention and everything that kind of goes into a lot of those different songs, like the lyrical style, the perspective of the person who is singing the song, all that changes, and so all the songs are very different, even though the backbone is the same.
Other questions? Anybody have a question that hasn't spoken yet?
Hi, I have a question.
Sure.
I was wondering, you were saying that you've written for like commercial advertisements using mostly piano and kind of just supporting the vibe of the commercial.
Mm-hmm.
But how did you kind of break into that industry and find the people looking for music for their ads?
So again, the way that I did it was just a friend who was already kind of doing that work came to me and said, he knew that I played the piano, and so he's like, we kind of need this sort of thing. And then, so we did it together for this one particular ad. And then the sort of place that he works with, who finds music for ads and commercials, things like that, they really liked it. And so then we kind of started developing that relationship. So there are a lot of places that will work with ad agencies and work with clients to just put music in there, and a lot of kind of like have like a stable of artists that they just sort of work with. So contacting them and seeing if you can kind of develop that relationship and see if what you do musically is like something that they don't have a lot of. Trying to find your niche, I guess, in that, doing what it is that you do, and doing it, being able to do it well. And then also with them, like that whole world is so fast. Like they'll call you in the morning and be like, hey, we want this like epic piece of music that does this and hits all these notes, and we need it in 2 hours. Can you do that? And you have to say, yeah, I can do that, right? It happens like that quickly. So then, and also being able to like be consistent in what you deliver. If you say that you're going to be like, okay, I can get you that, then you have to get something that's representative of that in that time frame. Otherwise if you don't, you'll never hear from them again. So it's like that kind of competitive. And then you kind of develop a relationship, and it kind of flows from there. But initially, like working on what you do musically, developing a level of like confidence in what you do, that you feel like you could produce that in say 3 hours. Okay. And then once you feel like you have, develop a relationship with them, send them stuff that you do, and just be proactive about that conversation with them. But I wouldn't start that process until you are really sure that you feel like you could do that in the span of 2 or 3 hours with like a gift.
Gotcha. Well, thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else? I know we're getting a little bit towards the end of time, but I just want to make sure that everybody, especially people who haven't had a chance to talk or say anything, gets a chance. Okay, then I'm gonna ask this: what are you mostly working on now, Patrick? Like you talked a lot about intention, and like what are you?
Yeah. Well, right now, working through this moment that we're all working through, so I'm writing songs and trying to just find something that uh, reflects and honors the gravity of like the situation that we're all in, collectively, and to be honest, like haven't really found it yet. So but yeah, that's what I'm working on. That's what I'm trying to find.
Okay, I'm going to ask you one more question because I've got you here and we have to think about this stuff in class a lot. So the more perspectives I can get. Um, uh, um, how much do you feel like attention to music production, because you've done producing work, interacts with a songwriter, or when you work with a producer yourself, how do you negotiate the relationship between your aesthetic and another person who has a lot of control over how you might sound, for example?
So
I mean,
in a perfect world, so for the most part, the things that I record these days, I end up kind of doing most of the production, but sometimes I will work with another producer. And in a perfect world, you're seeking that person out because of what they do aesthetically, and you see how that can like sort of fit into the vision for what you're trying to do and like make it better, basically. In a perfect world, that's the kind of relationship with a producer that you want to have, that what they naturally do makes what you're trying to do, it'll make it better. And then how you navigate those sort of personal relationships is pretty variable. Some people are weirder than others. Some people like have a bigger head than others. Some people want to feel like they are putting their stamp on what you're doing more than others. And you have to kind of just be very, very, very firm in your resolution of what it is that you're trying to do, and honor that at every moment. And that means drawing boundaries with people and saying, no, sorry, this is my thing. We're not doing it that way. We're doing it this way. If that's what it means. You don't have to be a dick about it, I guess. But, you know, if that's what it takes, that's what it takes.
Yeah, but and also, I mean, like we talk about in class, like not a lot of people have done a lot of performing out, but like you're collaborating even with a sound person when you go on stage, right? Like, and so I just because I was selling merch for you last year,
Uh-huh.
like I watched you in sound check,
Right.
you know, like really teach this sound guy exactly what you wanted from like the stage, and by the time by the end of it, you know, the sound sounded exactly like the record. Like it was like
Right.
nailing it. But you had to, you coached him. I mean, you weren't a dick or anything, but like, but
That's good.
how did you kind of develop that kind of sense? Like you're somebody who really knows what you want.
Right. So that comes just from like doing a lot of recording. And so you finding like what you and knowing how you got all those sounds. So it's like, okay, well, you want the gain structure like this, you know, or as close to this as you can get it. You know, the EQs like this, uh, you know, compression at this ratio, you know, at this attack, whatever, trying to get as specific about all that stuff as you can, because when sound goes onto a record, it's all very specific, like how those components go into creating that particular sound. So being as specific and methodical as you can be about those technical aspects of like sound work. So then when you go into a live venue, knowing, like if you're someone like me who tours by himself, and then, you know, I usually work with whatever sound person is there that night. So for me, like that's like if I don't coach them, if I don't tell them exactly what I want and how to get it based on what up to chance, right? And what he does out there is has a potential to really change what I do. Did I freeze? No. So that was why I sort of really started doing that. And if you guys play out, you're gonna have to do it too, you know, to some degree. Some guys get really crabby when you tell them, have to like walk them step by step, like through what you want to do, but it's your thing. So if they get, you know, you just have to figure out how to work with them.
Okay. Any final questions for Patrick? Because I can just keep talking to you all day. But
We can talk later.
yeah. Anyone? Okay, yeah, so there's another, we'll talk about it maybe on another day, but for those of you who took the class, the dime class last semester when Esme Patterson came in, like, I think that that stage thing especially gets gendered in fucked up ways that
Oh yeah.
if you know, if you're a woman, like a lot of times, like that being directive to especially the sound people who just assume that you don't know how to tune your guitar or like assume that you don't know that stuff. It becomes a different kind of negotiation.
Well, just like, I
um,
mean, you know, so you could go into a club, and if you know nothing about sound, like you maybe you have a sound guy who's really into like 80s hair metal, right? So he's really processing music through that kind of aesthetic. All right. So if you don't know, like, doesn't necessarily have anything to do with your sound, that might be a really bad combination for you. But his natural like ground zero is already sort of tilted in that direction, right? So if you're not careful, like you're a band and all of a sudden you're like, why does my snare drum sound like that? Oh, you've got a fucking gate on it. Like, why are you gating the snare like that? Right? If you don't know what's going on, like then your shit's just going to sound crazy and weird, and you're not going to know why, and you're not going to know how to fix it. It's not going to be representative of what you do.
Real quick, if I can comment on that, I just want to say I think that's where the metal community is kind of ahead of the curve of most of the music industry right now, because most metal musicians go direct in nowadays, right? So sound guys barely have to do anything. They're in control of their tone from the stage. Like even the singers are using their own effects processors and preamps on stage, and the technology has gone to the point where the price is like sustainable for a career. Like everything's pretty cheap.
That's a great point. I mean, you know, taking your sound, taking what you do, taking like as many of the variables out of that equation as you can you should do live. And they have like amp simulators now that can
Oh yeah.
any tone you want, like to a T, less expensive.
I want to get that message out to the rap community, because a lot of the times they're rapping over their songs so they can't get the effects. And I'm just like, well, if you just got a boss like processor for your vocals, you can get all the effects.
Yeah, you can like have, you know, you can stack your vocal harmonies. You can have a whole. I mean, it gets pretty karaoke.
Yeah. Yep.
And well, speaking of that, so a really great producer, Dave Friedman, who produced a bunch of the Flaming Lips stuff, was their sound guy for a while, and they told him to play the soundboard like it was its own instrument for a long time. That's how they developed their relationship with him, and not so much like in the later stuff, but it actually created this sound, and so when David produces a low record or other types of records, that there really is this sound for him as a producer.
Yeah, I mean that's like dub, you know, Lee Scratch Perry and like all that stuff. Like, there's the musicians doing what they do, and then the sound guy basically being another member of the band, and creating a very specific and new aesthetic.
Yeah, and on the gender front, like as Esme has told me, like she had Kim Baxter, who's a great sound person in town, was playing drums for her a while, but then eventually she just started taking Kim on tour as her sound person, just because she's like, I can trust you, and I don't have to negotiate these other, you know, sometimes gendered relationships that are kind of, you know, part of the sexism that we have to deal with in society, unfortunately. Okay. I really will, like, last question, if there's a last question out there. Okay. Thank you very much for joining us, Patrick. It's really good.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for being here, everybody, and for your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.